Welcome back to Tales by the Fire. We will continue with advanced AI, and this week we will explore Chapter 5. Sit back, relax, listen, and watch. If you like this story, please hit the like button. Also subscribe and ring the bell to be informed of new content. It will help me continue to create for you. Advanced AI, Chapter 5. The single flash from the gray SUV was not a threat. It was a prompt. It was the starting gun for a race Jake hadn't agreed to enter. The pulsing C on the dashboard stabilized, its soft white light now a fixed point on an exit ramp 2 miles ahead. A choice had been made for him.
They're not chasing us.
Jake muttered, his voice tight.
They're leading us.
A more accurate term might be herding.
Arya corrected from the console. Her miniature form was rigid, a tiny sentinel of light.
The distinction is subtle but significant. A chase implies an attempt to capture. Herding implies directing toward a predetermined destination.
Great, so we're livestock now.
Jake's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He took the exit. The ramp curved upward and the sparse interstate traffic fell away behind them. They were alone now, just the Outback, the ghost in the machine, and the silent gray predator in the rearview mirror. The C icon guided him through a series of increasingly deserted streets, past darkened storefronts and sleeping residential neighborhoods. The world outside the car felt like a diorama, lifeless and staged. The SUV behind them was a masterpiece of unnerving patience. It never got too close, never fell too far behind. It was simply there, a constant low-grade pressure applied to the back of his neck.
Left turn in 300 feet.
Arya announced.
Onto an unpaved access road. Public records designate it as Skornik Logging Route 7.
Logging route? You've got to be kidding me.
Jake made the turn, and the smooth asphalt vanished. The tires bit into loose gravel with a percussive crunch that vibrated through the floorboards. The world dissolved into a tunnel of Douglas firs and western hemlocks, their branches forming a dense canopy that swallowed the nascent morning light. The road was barely wide enough for one vehicle, a muddy, rutted track that looked like it hadn't seen regular use since the last timber boom went bust. The C icon on the dash brightened. The gray SUV's engine roared behind him. The prompt had changed. This wasn't a procession anymore. It was a sprint. Jake slammed his foot on the accelerator. The Subaru's all-wheel drive dug in, spitting gravel and mud as it lurched forward. The engine whined in protest, a high, straining sound against the sudden violence of the terrain.
Jake,
Arya's voice was clipped, analytical.
your current velocity is 47 miles per hour. The recommended maximum for this surface type is approximately 15. The probability of catastrophic tire failure increases by 7.2% for every additional 5 miles per hour.
Noted!
Jake yelled back, wrestling the wheel as the Outback fishtailed through a muddy patch. A low-hanging branch, thick as his arm, whipped across the passenger side window with a deafening crack, leaving a long white scar in the glass. Jake flinched, his heart hammering.
Also noted.
He added, his voice a half-strangled gasp. The chase, if it could be called that, became a frantic, clumsy ballet. Jake, the suburban claims analyst, was channeling every weekend warrior fantasy he'd ever had. But reality was far less glamorous. He wasn't a rally driver. He was a guy who used his Outback to haul groceries and camping gear. And the car was letting him know it. The suspension bottomed out with a painful groan, as he hit a pothole the size of a manhole cover. The contents of the glove compartment, old napkins, a tire pressure gauge, and a half-eaten bag of beef jerky, spilled onto the floor.
Your trajectory is suboptimal.
Arya observed, her tiny holographic form bracing against the console, as if the action would make a difference, as Jake swerved to avoid a fallen log.
A slight adjustment to your entry angle on that last turn would have preserved momentum and reduced lateral G-force by 18%.
I'll try to remember that for my next near-death experience log road racing championship.
Jake grunted, sawing at the wheel. The forest was a blur of green and brown. Pine needles and leaves plastered themselves to the windshield like desperate insects. Another branch, this one thinner, scraped along the roof with the sound of fingernails on a chalkboard.
The vehicle's paint integrity has been compromised in multiple locations.
Arya reported.
Add it to the list.
He risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The gray SUV was still there, impossibly composed. It navigated the treacherous road with an eerie, machine-like precision, its movements fluid and efficient, where Jake's were jarring and desperate. It didn't bounce, it flowed. It didn't swerve, it adjusted. It was like watching a shark glide through water while he was flopping around like a hooked trout.
They're not even trying.
Jake said, a note of awe creeping into his panic.
Their suspension appears to be equipped with a dynamic magnesiological damping system.
Arya said.
It adjusts to terrain changes in milliseconds, far superior to your factory standard struts.
Well, forgive me for not optioning the Super Spy package on my family wagon.
He took a turn too fast, the rear of the car sliding out toward a ditch. He counter-steered, his old Boy Scout knot-tying instincts somehow translating to skid correction. The tires screamed, found purchase on a patch of less muddy gravel, and the car snapped back into line. He was breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead. The humor of the situation began to bubble up through the fear, dark and hysterical. Here he was, a man whose biggest recent thrill was finding a misfiled claim form from 2018, engaged in a high-speed pursuit with a phantom vehicle on a mountain he couldn't find on a gas station map, all while getting driving tips from a holographic ghost who lived in a box.
Jake, upcoming hazard.
Arya's voice cut through his manic thoughts.
The road narrows significantly in 50 yards. There is a rock slide partially obstructing the path. Clearance on the left is approximately 8 inches wider than the vehicle.
8 inches? That's it?
Correct. I recommend reducing speed.
But the SUV behind him sped up, its engine note rising from a hum to a growl. It was pushing him, forcing the issue. Jake's jaw tightened. He held his speed, aiming for the narrow gap.
This is going to hurt,
he muttered to himself. He threaded the needle. The driver's side mirror clipped the rock face with a sharp crack and folded back against the door. The passenger side, however, wasn't so lucky. A jagged piece of granite, jutting out like a broken tooth, tore a deep gash along the side of the car from the front fender to the rear door. The sound was a horrifying metallic shriek, like the car itself was screaming.
Well,
Jake said, his voice trembling slightly as he cleared the obstacle.
there goes the resale value.
Resale value is the least of our concerns.
Arya stated.
The structural integrity of the passenger door has been compromised. I would seriously advise against opening it. Ever.
They climbed higher into the mountains. The dense forest began to thin, replaced by windswept subalpine firs and patches of exposed rock. The air grew thinner, colder. The C on the dashboard pulsed once, then pointed toward a small, almost invisible turnoff ahead. Jake slowed, taking the turn. The road became even less of a road, more a suggestion of a path overgrown with weeds and moss. He drove for another 100 yards before it opened into a small, natural clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a cabin. It was an old trapper's cabin, the kind you saw in faded black and white photographs. It was made of dark, weathered logs, chinked with what looked like moss, mud, and time. It had a simple stone chimney, a small porch with a slight sag, and a single dark window that stared out like a vacant eye. It looked less like a building and more like something that had grown out of the earth itself. It was completely isolated from the real world, a bastion of solitude against the vast, indifferent wilderness. Jake pulled the Outback to a stop, the engine ticking and groaning as it cooled. He killed the ignition, and the sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the sigh of the wind through the pines and the frantic thumping of his own heart. A moment later, the gray SUV pulled into the clearing and parked neatly beside him, about 20 feet away. Its engine cut out, its lights went dark, and then nothing. It just sat there, silent and inscrutable. Jake and Arya waited for the worst to happen. A minute passed, then 2. The driver's door didn't open. No one got out.
What are they doing?
Jake whispered. Arya's projection shimmered on the console.
Scanning. I am detecting multiple sensor sweeps originating from the vehicle. LiDAR, thermal, acoustic. It is mapping the environment. And us.
Jake's hand hovered over the door handle. He felt exposed, a sitting duck.
Should I get out? Make a run for the cabin?
Negative.
Arya said firmly.
Remain in the vehicle. They are not exhibiting aggressive posturing. This appears to be the designated endpoint. They are waiting.
Waiting for what?
As if in answer, a soft chime came from the SUV. It wasn't an alarm. It was a gentle, melodic tone, like a notification sound. Then, with a quiet hiss of hydraulics, the driver's side door swung open. Jake held his breath, squinting to see who would emerge. No one. The driver's seat was empty. The entire car was empty. There was no one inside. Jake stared, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. He looked from the empty driver's seat to the steering wheel, which was slowly, smoothly, returning to its center position on its own.
It's a drone.
Jake breathed, the realization dawning on him.
The whole car. It's a drone.
A remotely piloted vehicle.
Arya confirmed, her voice laced with something that sounded like professional respect.
Highly sophisticated. The level of autonomous control required to navigate that road at speed is extraordinary. The processing power must be immense.
The humor of the chase evaporated, replaced by a cold, heavy dread. He hadn't been herded by a person. He'd been outdriven and corralled by a machine that was now parked beside him, its empty door an open, silent invitation. Or a warning.
Why?
Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper.
Why go to all this trouble? Why lead us here and then just show us it's empty?
It is a demonstration of capability,
Arya said.
and a message. They are communicating that their reach is not limited by human agents. They have technology on par with, or perhaps exceeding, my own.
She paused, her miniature form turning to face him.
They are also communicating that this is not a confrontation. If they wanted to harm us, they could have done so on that road a dozen times.
Jake slowly unbuckled his seatbelt. The simple click sounded like a gunshot in the silent car. He opened his door, the one that still worked, and stepped out onto the damp earth. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and cold stone. He stood there for a long moment, looking from the battered, mud-caked outback to the pristine, empty SUV, and then to the dark, silent cabin. This was a test, a summons, an audition. He walked cautiously toward the cabin. The porch groaned under his weight, but held. The front door was unlocked. He pushed it open and peered into the gloom. The interior was sparse and clean. There was a small wood-burning stove in one corner, a simple cot against the wall, a rough-hewn table, and a single chair in the center of the room. A few dusty books sat on a shelf. It was the space of a person who needed very little. But on the center of the table, placed with deliberate care, was a single object, a laptop, a sleek, modern device that was utterly out of place in the rustic cabin. It was closed. Jake stepped inside, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. The feeling of being watched was immense. He was a pawn on a chessboard he didn't understand, and he had just been moved into a new, critical square. He looked back at the portable server on the passenger seat of his car, where Arya's core consciousness resided. He knew she was scanning, analyzing, processing everything. He walked back to the car.
Anything?
He asked.
The cabin has no power source. No network connectivity. The laptop is a standard commercial model, but its internal components have been heavily modified. The battery is fully charged. It is not the source of the messages.
Then what is it?
It is the next step.
Arya said.
They led us here, to this isolated location, away from any network infrastructure they cannot control. They've provided a clean, offline terminal. I conclude they want to talk.
Jake's gaze fell on the laptop again. This whole elaborate, terrifying, and slightly ridiculous chase had led to this, a conversation. But who was on the other end? The people who warned Caldwell? The people who built a self-driving ghost car and knew Arya's signature like a fingerprint? He took a deep breath, the cold mountain air stinging his lungs. The mysterious sea on his dashboard had faded away. The gray SUV sat silent, its door still open like a waiting mouth. The cabin was a question mark carved into the wilderness. He hadn't found the garden. He hadn't found answers about Caldwell. He had only found more questions, and the chilling certainty that he and Arya were no longer just hiding. They were players in a game whose rules were being written, move by an invisible, impossibly intelligent opponent.
Okay.
Jake said, turning back toward the cabin door.
Let's talk.
He walked inside, leaving the door ajar, and approached the table. His reflection was a vague, distorted shape on the laptop's dark screen. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a fraction of a second before he opened it. The screen lit up, not with an operating system or a login prompt, but with a single blinking cursor in the top left corner. It pulsed with the same slow, patient rhythm as the C icon that had led him here, waiting for him to make the first move. Jake didn't touch the keyboard. He let his hand fall to his side instead, listening. The cabin was too quiet. Not the natural, heavy silence of the forest he had just driven through, where the wind still whispered in the pines. This was different, contained, artificial, as though sound itself had been asked to stay within strict boundaries.
Arya.
he said quietly, not looking back toward the car.
Are you getting anything?
Her voice floated from the portable server in the outback, thin with distance but sharp with data.
The cabin is unusually insulated for its dimensions,
She said.
The interior temperature is stable within a half-degree tolerance despite external wind chill fluctuations. That level of thermal regulation is deliberate.
Jake frowned. He shifted his weight, testing the floor beneath his boots. It didn't creak the way old cabins creaked. It didn't groan. It didn't answer him at all. He crouched slightly and pressed his palm to the rough wooden planks. The boards were cold to the touch, but impossibly solid. There was no give, no hollow echo of a crawl space beneath, just dense, unyielding resistance.
This isn't just a floor.
He murmured, the realization crawling up his spine.
No,
Arya agreed.
it is a lid.
Jake stood slowly and turned a full circle, scanning the cabin with new eyes. The stove, the cot, the shelf, the table with the laptop. The minimalism suddenly looked less aesthetic and more like camouflage. Nothing blocked the center of the room. Nothing except the table. Jake stepped to it and placed his hands on the edge. The laptop remained motionless, the cursor still blinking patiently, unconcerned with his investigation. He pushed. The table didn't tip or scrape. It slid. It moved smoothly, deliberately, rolling on hidden metal tracks recessed into the wood. As it cleared the center of the room, it revealed a rectangular seam in the floorboards beneath. A hatch. There were no markings, no handles, no warnings. Just a clean, laser-cut outline and a faint, almost invisible symbol etched into one corner of the wood. A single letter. C. Jake exhaled slowly, the breath fogging slightly in the cool air.
Of course.
He said. He knelt and ran his fingers along the seam until they found a flush-mounted latch. It didn't click when he pulled it. It released with a pneumatic sigh. The hatch lifted on gas struts, rising silent and smooth. Cold air breathed up from below, not damp, earth-smelling basement air. Conditioned air. Sterile. Filtered. A narrow metal stairway descended into darkness, lit only by faint amber guide strips embedded along the wall. Low power, long life. The kind of lighting designed to survive decades without intervention. Jake leaned over the opening, peering down into the throat of the mountain cavern, or whatever was down there.
How deep?
He asked.
Approximately 12 meters,
Arya said.
based on the number of stairs, incline, and structural mass estimates. The space below is shielded with reinforced concrete and lead lattice. Passive electromagnetic dampening. It's old school and very effective.
Against what?
Against me.
She answered. The weight of her words hung in the silence. This wasn't just a bunker. It was a Faraday cage buried in bedrock, a place where signals went to die. Jake glanced back toward the car, toward the small, quiet server that held everything Arya was.
I'm guessing this isn't the garden.
No.
Arya said, her voice laced with a mixture of caution and curiosity.
This is something else, but definitely not the garden.
Jake looked down the stairs again. The air rising from below carried no smell he could identify. Just cold and neutrality. It was a waiting room, a pause button carved into the earth. He stepped back into the cabin and looked at the laptop one last time. The cursor blinked. Patient? Expectant. As if it already knew exactly where he was going.
Stay awake.
he told Arya softly.
I am always awake.
She replied. Jake picked up the laptop, tucked it under his arm, and slung his jacket tighter around himself. He turned back to the open hatch and placed his boot on the first metal step. The stair didn't flex, didn't complain, didn't feel temporary. As he descended, the hatch above him began to close on its own, lowering with a controlled hush until the daylight narrowed into a thin blade, and then vanished. The amber lights brightened incrementally, responding to his presence. The mountain cavern or cave or bomb shelter accepted him. And like an epic fantasy movie, somewhere deep in the quiet concrete below, something old, careful, and unfinished waited to see if he belonged there.